Hello, everyone. How we doing tonight? Or this evening, I should say. I feel like I always end up correcting myself here. Hopefully all is well. Let me bump up the stream quality so you guys can see a little better. Can I get a little check that you guys can see everything and that you can hear me all right? Somebody give me a little check. In chat, perhaps? There we go. Awesome. All right. Lovely. All right. Well, you guys know monthly statistical outlook now. I don't know how far we at. I think we started this in February. My initial goal with these calls was to establish if there was any pertinence to using statistical analysis on a longer term perspective, because I've used it intraday, intra-week as well, which means, right, for the current week, for the current day. But what about for the current month and for the next month after that? Can it be valuable to use statistics? And I think that these calls have accurately proved that they are extremely useful in profiling months to come. So definitely excited to be continuing to do these. And let me tell you guys, we are not going anywhere with this. These are extremely valuable in my book, so I will be continuing to do them. But what are they, right? What are these calls that we do? What is the goal of these? And why do we even do them? Well, we profile into the next month so that during the weeks and throughout the month, we can accurately know what to expect and how, right? Now, of course, with the last 2 days, we've had some pretty aggressive movement, right? Last day to close out July and our first day NFP of August, we moved almost 5% lower. And after a pretty tight month, right, for the month of June, a pretty tighter range, well, we pretty much just undid all of this high resistance movement. Now, do I expect this to stop? Not really. But how can we use data and statistics to further profile these things? Well, that's what we're going to look at today. Now, I do need to change my screen every time, so can I just get a quick confirmation here? You guys can see I am now on Rice Statistics through Discord. Of course, the recording will grab everything so that if you guys want to review it later, you will be able to. Awesome. Thank you, guys. Always like to start with the ranges analysis, right? Profiling the month. Now, how can we do this? We go over here, we select August. Let's learn more about August. So we have 20 months here, right? We have 20 years of data currently for August. 60-40 direction, right? We're looking at bullish and bearish in this case. So looking at the monthly close, of course, at the start of the month, this is not the most useful data, right? But it can help us establish a direction. Now, 60-40 is not something I would make decisions based on. I think I've said it before that I need at least 70% for me to trade that framework. That is just where I have put my threshold and where it is best for me. Now, what we see that's kind of interesting here is that the most freaking high week and low week are all week ones. So what does that tell us about August? Well, not much just from the frame. But if we go into the extremes here a little bit, we can see we tend to form our extremes very early, which means that we tend to consolidate throughout the month, right? And does it actually surprise us? Well, if you've been a trader for a while, you know that August on the indices futures is usually more so of consolidation, right? We're getting ready to go into fall. There's a lot less volume and a lot less liquidity available for prices for our charts, right, to trend as much as we'd like them to. Even in July, we saw a lot of high resistance price movement. That is due to less active players in the market. At least that is my personal belief. But how does that affect our charts? Well, we can see it very clearly, right? Start of the month, end of the month, very high percentages. We also have week 3 that is pretty aggressive. This is pretty spread out data, right? There's not much we can do with data like this. But what we can do is say, okay, well, what if I have a bullish month of August? Well, in this case, I can notice that, hey, the low gets formed in week 1 and week 3, which are our highest percentages, right? Never after week 3. That is what is most important, interesting, and I guess useful as a data point for me at least. is that, okay, well, we might do some fuckery until week 3. But after week 3, if we are going to be bullish, we are going to expand right up until week 5, which is the highest statistical, how can we say it? Probability, I guess is the best way to put it. So for a bullish month, pretty straightforward. 50% of the time we'll form the extreme early. If not, it's going to go all the way up to week 3, and we're going to trend until week 5. Okay, but what about bearish now, right? Let's look at our bearish months. Well, same thing, but vice versa. The only difference that we see is that the high gets formed early on in week 1 almost every single time, right? 62% here is pretty good, but cumulative, you can see when I hover over this, we see our little pop-up. You can see the percentage during week 2, but also the cumulative probability, which means that if you include week 1 and week 2, 87% of the time, that high will be formed there. So if we are to see a bearish month, we'll see a trending bearish month, right? Overwhelming probabilities that go, that the low is done late in the month. So trending month, sure, but we tend to see a lot of consolidation during the middle weeks of August. Now, where we are most interested, at least for me, is my monthly levels, right? So I like to look at previous month high, previous month low, and in this case, we don't have any overwhelming probability other than, hey, we do have a small percentage of reaching the monthly low. As we can see from our charts, it is going to be one of those months. It certainly does look like it. And we have a decent chance of reaching for the monthly highs, and we're looking at that during week 1. 75% chance that it happens during week 1, 65% chance that we see it. Also, one thing I don't often go about, right, having this measurement unit in percentages is how I like to do it, but we can see some average levels. Now, as I said, this is not something I cover quite often, but these levels are the levels of the range, the distribution, manipulation, and retracement. These are your average levels that you are looking for. Now, distribution and retracement and manipulation are all aspects of this candle. If you are a Rice Statistics user, you can always go ahead and see the explanation here, but just for us, so we'll cover it. If we're looking at a bullish candle, the distribution open to high, retracement is going to be from the high to the close, and the manipulation from the open to the low. Now, vice versa for bearish candles. We're looking at opposite movement, full extent of the movement, retracement after, and the full range of the candle, is the range, right? And these average levels can give you some pretty good insight into when we are overextended or underextended. What does that mean, right? Well, if there's a week left in the month of August and the range is 5.6, I don't know, we're pretty close to those average range, so I'm not going to expect a lot of movement. But if we are now in week 2, 1% range, then I'm going to expect a lot. But enough about random statistics, right? Let me switch back my screen to our trading view, because now how can we use this data? Well, we just saw that we have a 5.8 average range and we already did 4.49. So do I expect a very beautiful month of August? Well, sadly, no. I expect a lot of consolidation following this very aggressive move lower. And also, we saw that we had a 65% chance of reaching previous month's high during week 1. Am I going to expect that to happen? Not really, no. Why? Because we just went down 5% once again. So I'm going to expect some form of correction and probably reaching for previous month low. But the truth is, we've already done most of the range for the month. Now, does this mean we won't see an outlier where we might go a little lower and then slowly grind up during the month? Not at all, right? Statistical probabilities are not 100%, and we see some months where, hey, that's not what happened. It's kind of like if we looked at the statistical probabilities for the year and we compared those to what happened during COVID. Well, no, it did not do what it was supposed to do. Let's just say we had quotation marks there because of the statistical probabilities. Why? Because we had some shit going on in the world, and that affects our markets, and that brings to outliers. That's what I like to call them. There are a bunch of names for them, and they are accurate, valid terms, but I don't use those. Outliers, we just can't trust them. So how do we interact, right? If you're a statistical-based trader like I am myself, how do we interact with those specific months, those specific times where we differ from these statistical probabilities? Well, I still use the profiling And I'm going to refer to the average range to understand when I am ready to have a mean reversion move. What does that mean? Well, here is our monthly open right here, okay? So I'm going to look at the total range I'm going to be looking for. Of course, we already formed a current high, so I'm going to look around the 5.8 mark. I am not precise with this. And I understand that when we reach these levels, approximately, okay, which means that we could be a little bit higher, we could be a little bit deeper. This is where I'm going to look for reversals, and where am I going to look for? To a retracement. This is how I personally interact. And as we saw from Rice Statistics, we had a 40% chance to have a bearish month of August, right? This is, as I said, not the kind of data I want to be focused on too much, but we can still use that to find some other things. As I said, okay, is our profiling going to be really good? Perhaps not. So what can we do? I still like to refer to seasonality. Even if the profiling will be wrong, we could say, I like to refer to the seasonality and look at what do we usually do during the month of August. And now, I mean, you don't need me to tell you that. We usually consolidate and have a slow grind up, right? If we have our time where we go lower here, right, we can see that current year to date, we're 10.79%, and we're looking, this is July 31st, our latest data point right now on Rice Statistics. We see 10.79%, right? We just went down 5% after that day total as well. So what are we going to do, right? Truth is, I don't know, but I'm going to refer to the same thing that we see on this chart right here. I'm going to be looking for consolidation. I'm going to be looking for a slow grind up to reverse this move that we just did. Now, yes, same thing. The only divergence that we see on both assets is going to be a little hard here, but let me try and zoom in. Well, our axle is going to be a little bit weird, so it's going to be hard to see. But what we see, the divergence between NASDAQ and ES, if I go full screen here, we see that NASDAQ does not form that low on the 24th-ish of August, right? We see the divergence of NASDAQ being higher. Well, if we look at ES, is lower on these same points. I'm looking at the 15-year average mainly in this case, right? More recently, 10-year and 5-year, we've seen a lot more bullish price action during August. That's what I want to see. Now, is that what's going to happen? Well, times are unclear when we see a 5% move in 2 days following, honestly, what was it? News? Was it world event? I don't know. And the truth about it is I don't care, because I am going to refer to my charts and what we do during the month to accurately profile. A lot of data was shared, a lot of different points that we just discussed. But the truth of the matter is we look for August to form a range early. What does that mean? During the first week of August. Now, the first full week is this week. So I'm looking for August to form a range and then slowly play within that range. And what does that mean for my own trading? Reversion trades always. For example, if this week we see a slow grind down to previous monthly low, which is what I would like to see, right? An early week retracement, something like Monday and Tuesday, perhaps we could see a retracement into the range we just formed. And just so you guys know what I am referring to, I'm referring to this range right here that we are currently forming. A small retracement and then a continuation to previous monthly low. And then I expect the main price action of the month, and I'm looking at this from week 1, week 2, week 3, perhaps even diving into week 4 to trade within these levels. And every time we break out of these levels, for example, if we were to break out here, I'm going to be looking for a reversion, which is just another way for me to say a retracement. This is specifically how I'm going to be interacting with the whole month. Not going to lie to you guys, I understand we're not all living with the same goals in terms to our trading, but I know that for myself, I don't want to ruin my year in 1 month. So I'm going to be low risk. Well, I'm going to be managing aggressively. What does that mean? Well, once I go on losing streaks, I'm going to cut risk very aggressively. So if I lose even just 2 trades in a row, I'm going to cut risk down by 50%. If I keep on that losing streak, I'm going to go down to my minimal risk, which is actually $250, right? It's not even a percentage of account anymore. I just trade micros, $250 risk. You'll notice that that number allows you to have plenty of contracts to take profit, usually around the 3 to 4 mark with my stop losses. all that to say, the month of August usually ends in consolidation. We'll see with our monthly open here. If I just bring back our opening prices and we look at the monthly open, I would like to see price trend in this area. One thing I don't want to see now, which is something different that I don't usually speak on, I don't want to see us revisit these levels. Truth is, these levels are going to be very aggressive for down move and are going to act as fuel in my book. When I see things like these, I see low resistance between these movements, and I don't want to see us extend past that. So yes, I do want to see us dive a little bit lower, go to previous monthly low. And if we go to our weekly chart, something I rarely do, we can see that in this range, we do have a beautiful discount fair value gap that we could revisit, right? This makes sense to me. Us diving lower, taking out previous monthly low to then go higher makes sense to me. But anything further than that would be too much of an extension in my book. So diving back low to these levels, seeing some form of higher time frame SMT would also be great in this area. Perhaps ES will dive down into it while NASDAQ stays higher, even though with this distance and this momentum that we've seen in the last 2 days, I don't believe that will happen. I believe both assets will go and reach for those. But seeing previous monthly low get taken and then a slow grind up all the way throughout the month. Of course, we're going to have a lot more news later on. This first full week, we barely have any news. If you guys have seen the announcement I just did, we have, I think it is, I was going to say PPI, but it is PMI on Tuesday, along with unemployment claims on Thursday. So I don't think we're going to have the biggest week. Definitely going to be very careful here. But as I said, looking for some form of small retracement into previous monthly low. And then, of course, if we do hit that level before, for example, Thursday or even on Friday, we could see some form of nice retracement as another trading opportunity there. And for the month as a whole, dive down, slow grind up, perhaps even close the month bullish, which would be of the highest probability to be. Do we have any questions? I know we just talked a whole bunch of numbers, a whole bunch of prediction, provisions, and all that bullshit, all right? A lot of big talk. So I want to help you guys understand what I'm looking for, what I'm seeing, even on a month like August, which for me, and in terms of statistical probabilities, is very unsure. You know, I hear a lot of traders say this, and a lot of very successful traders, when they talk on whether it's an autobiography or even just talking on social media, right? They always say that this thing is know when your edge is present. And I know that in August, my personal edge is not very present. So do I make a lot of money in August? No, that's the truth. I rarely even trade that much in August. I've seen my data, right? And I don't trade so much in August. And am I happy with that? Of course not. I want to be making money all days, every day, all the time. But I need to know where my edge is most pronounced, and statistical probabilities in August, at least from a longer term perspective, are not too pronounced. Now, if you want to look at intraday frameworks, that's a whole different thing, right? They were great in August. So intraday, my edge is present, but for a long-term trend perspective, I am not, which means that I often get my daily bias wrong during August. And that means I miss out on great opportunities. And from a trading perspective, that means lower win rate, less return hitting my books. And I didn't see any of you guys type to ask for a question, so I'm guessing it was pretty clear. We also discussed that we could review Friday's price action. If you guys want to go back over it, I am definitely open to doing that too, as we did not have a price action review on Friday. All right, just so we can close it off, is everything good for the monthly statistical outlook? After that, I will end the recording, and for you lucky people in Discord, we're going to go review Friday. All right. Well, we're going to call it there for the monthly statistical outlook and speak more on Friday. And for you people that are watching this on YouTube and you can't make it, well, I do apologize for you because you're missing out.